This is IBA News coming to you from Jerusalem. We open with the deadly terror attack just a few hundred meters away from this studio in the capital, in which 3 people were killed and dozens more injured. At around 12 noon, a bulldozer driver from East Jerusalem went on a deadly rampage down the capital's central Jaffa Street Boulevard, slamming into pedestrians, crushing passing cars, and even knocking over a bus full of people. Only shots from a new IDF recruit kept the terrorists from reaching the city's crowded Machane Yehuda open market and causing even greater tragedy. IBA's Dennis Zinn brings us the details.
This is one of the motor cars that were flattened by the terrorists' bulldozer on Jaffa Road in central Jerusalem at around noon today. A second bulldozer was used to raise the first off the crushed vehicle. 3 people were killed in the attack, 44 were ferried to hospitals in the capital, 2 in serious condition and the rest with light wounds. The terrorist has been identified as a resident of the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Tzurbacher, adjacent to Talpiot, who has a criminal record. It's believed that he acted on his own. The man, who was apparently employed by the Jerusalem Light Rail Construction Company, drove the earth-moving vehicle from a nearby building site and made his way to Jaffa Road, where he began his killing spree over a distance of some 150 meters. Within moments of the start of the rampage, it was clear to eyewitnesses that this was a terror attack in progress. The huge vehicle plowed into a string of vehicles, using its shovel as a battering ram. It ran over pedestrians and overturned a packed Egged bus. A second bus was only lightly damaged due to the evasive action taken by its driver. The carnage was brought to a halt by swift security force action. One officer jumped onto the bulldozer, entering the cabin, and began wrestling with the terrorist, while a soldier on leave from the army, seen here outside the cabin, shot the man dead. Police investigators believe that the bulldozer driver was heading towards the Machane Yehuda open-air market, where he would have wreaked even more havoc. Within minutes of the attack, the site was swarming with policemen, medical teams, bystanders and TV crews. The attack site is situated on Jerusalem's Media Mile, where all of the country's national TV stations are situated and most of the foreign news companies.
Another example where citizens, civilians of the State of Israel are being targeted by the extremists, while the State of Israel is trying to do everything to reach an accommodation with the Palestinians. Among the Palestinians, there were those who are deliberately murdering civilians.
Police in the capital have put forces on high alert. The last major terror attack in Jerusalem was carried out last March, when 8 yeshiva students were killed. That attack was also carried out by a terrorist who was a resident of East Jerusalem. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Former head of Israel Radio, Yoni Ben Menachem, was on Jaffa Road when the attack took place and had to swerve his car out of the way to avoid being crushed by the bulldozer. He described the experience in a telephone interview with IBA's Aaron Viner.
As I was driving, all of a sudden, a big tractor appeared in front of me, and he was driving straight towards me, and I had the feeling that he just want to clash into my car.
Was he driving at a fast speed?
Yes, he was driving at a fast speed, and immediately my reaction was to run away from him, and I turned over my car to the sidewalk, and the minute I got out of the car, I saw an Israeli policeman chasing by foot, chasing this tractor, and he climbed, the policeman climbed on the tractor to get to the driver, and he was fighting with the driver and forcing him to drive the tractor to the side of the street. And then he was fighting with the tractor driver.
They were engaged like in a physical struggle.
Yeah, a physical struggle, yes, definitely a strong physical struggle. And the crowd that was surrounding the tractor started screaming in Hebrew to the policeman, shoot it. And this is what he did. He took out his gun, and from a very close range, he shot him 3 times, and then another policeman, civilian clothes, also climbed on the tractor to the driver's seat and shot the terrorist again with his pistol.
Of the victims that you were able to see, what condition did they appear to be in?
The appeared to look like something like a deed or something, an action of a crazy man who was acting in rage and trying to destroy with the tractor, destroy as much as he can and kill as many people as he can.
Yoni, you saw the terrorist. Can you describe him to us?
He was young, about 30 years old, definitely a Palestinian, and slim, and wearing working clothes of a driver who was working in the construction.
In reaction, Interior Minister Meir Shitrit said that today's terrorist was a prime example of a resident of East Jerusalem who is given rights and benefits from the state, but when given the order, goes and murders people. He added that the attack does not have to negatively affect the ongoing peace process with the Palestinians, and it would play into the hands of those who would like to torpedo the peace process. Meanwhile, U.S. President George W. Bush called Prime Minister Ehud Olmert immediately following the attack and offered his condolences to the victims' families. Palestinian reaction to today's terrorist attack was mixed. Hamas spokesman Sami Abu Zuhri said he believes the attack was carried out because of what he called the continuation of Israeli crimes against our people in the West Bank and Jerusalem. He also said it was a rejection of the occupation and the terrorist was only trying to stop aggression against Palestinian people. However, a spokesman for the Palestinian Authority, Tayyib Abud el-Rahim, said the PA condemns and rejects such attacks which harm the Palestinian national cause. IDF Reserve Major General Yaakov Amidror told IBA's Aaron Viner that in our volatile region, citizens must always remain vigilant in the face of what is known in Hebrew as a pigua, or terrorist attack.
The fact that it happened in Jerusalem in those days, it's not a surprise, because we have to take into consideration that the efforts of the terror organization continue all the time. And the fact that we don't suffer from that is because the IDF is in the West Bank doing everything with the Shabak to prevent it. And it is ongoing effort which didn't stop for even one day. And the difference between here and Gaza is that here we have the control and we have the ability to stop them. Otherwise, it will be looked like Gaza.
Do you think today's attack was a statement by some organization which has not yet claimed responsibility in relation to what issue? Gaza, West Bank, Hezbollah?
I think that one of the mistakes that we are doing, they are looking for reasons. They do it whenever they can. And here it is a very good example. We are negotiating with the Hamas. We are negotiating with the Fatah. We are negotiating with Hezbollah. And at the same time, someone is doing his best to make a pigua. And it will happen in it will happen in the future. We have to understand that the efforts to implement piguim against us will be on the ground as long as we will be here in the state of Israel. And the only way to prevent it is to control the area like the control that we have in the West Bank, and to let the IDF and the Shabak to work together to prevent it.
In other developments today, Israel reopened 3 border crossings into Gaza after they were closed yesterday following Qassam rocket attacks on the western Negev, which Israel said was a blatant breach of the ceasefire agreement. The Karni, Nahal Oz, and Erez terminals were reopened, allowing goods to pass into Gaza, including the first cement shipments into the Gaza Strip in more than a year. A total of 150 truckloads were expected to cross into Gaza, according to the Army spokesman. In a related story, Palestinians stormed the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, pelting Egyptian troops with rocks. Egyptian police beat back the demonstrators with a water cannon, preventing anyone from crossing the border. The Egyptians had promised to open the Rafah crossing, but only a small number of Palestinians were allowed through, sparking the unrest. In January, Hamas militants blew open the border with Egypt, allowing thousands of people to cross through until it was resealed about 2 weeks later. Turning now to politics, and Internal Security Minister Avi Dichter today said that if Prime Minister Ehud Olmert continues to lead Kadima following party primaries, then Kadima will lose its grip on power. Speaking at a press conference at the Knesset, Dichter said that the Prime Minister has made an enormous contribution to the country and to the party, but that current circumstances demand new primaries to choose his successor. The U.S. State Department had harsh words for an unnamed Pentagon official who speculated that Israel would likely attack Iranian nuclear facilities before the end of the year. State Department spokesman Tom Casey labeled the statement foolish and added that people often have no clue what they're talking about. The Pentagon official predicted that Israel would attack Iran before Tehran had enough enriched uranium to produce a nuclear weapon, and before a Russian-made air defense system purchased by Iran became operational. And Tehran also downplayed reports that Israel is planning to attack its nuclear sites. Foreign Minister Manoucher Mottaki told NBC News that Israel is not in a position to carry out such an attack, but he warned that if Iran is hit by either Israel or the United States, the hardline Islamic Republic will retaliate.
Where Israel is today and now will not allow it to engage in regional adventurism. Israel is still facing the post-trauma of the attack against Lebanon in 2006. So we don't believe that Israel is in a position to be able to engage in another attack in the region.
How would Iran respond to an attack by Israel? Would it be a direct response against Israel, or would you also use allies in the region, in Iraq and in Lebanon, namely Hezbollah?
Israel knows fully well that if it were to engage in another attack in the region, what would happen to it? It will confront problems throughout the region. There is no doubt that Israel and its supporters will regret such an attack.
Would Iran make a distinction between an attack by Israel and an attack by the United States?
No.
You would make no distinction? Do you think the United States would back any military action by Israel against Iran?
It should be understood that all efforts should be made towards Israel avoiding a militaristic action in the region.
Optimistic accounts today from the indirect talks taking place in Ankara between Israeli and Syrian officials. Sources in the Turkish Foreign Ministry said that following the visit of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad to Paris on July 13th, direct negotiations will begin between Israel and Syria. The exact timing of the talks and the level of the officials taking part will be decided after Assad's visit to Paris. Prime Minister Olmert will also be in the French capital. The two will be attending a conference of leaders of Mediterranean states. And Britain today declared the military wing of Hezbollah a terrorist organization. The move makes it a criminal offense to belong to, raise funds for, or encourage support for Hezbollah. The Home Office said it took the action because of Hezbollah's support for terrorists operating against coalition forces and civilians in Iraq, and for its support of Palestinian terror groups. Hezbollah's political, social, and humanitarian branches are exempt from the ban. 8 of Israel's most accomplished and daring Mossad agents stepped out of the shadows for a brief moment last night to be rewarded for their outstanding contribution to the country's security. No one was allowed to film the agents, but President Shimon Peres awarded the 8 the Israel Defense Prize for their part in an unusually complex operation. The operation and the new school year will open on September 1st as planned, but it may not be a quiet semester. That's the message of Ran Erez, chairman of the Secondary School Teachers Association. He was speaking today at a press conference at a Tel Aviv hotel. Erez told reporters that the Teachers Association is gearing up to get the government to make good on promises it made in an agreement signed in December of last year. That deal ended the longest education strike in the country's history. Erez also blasted new government educational reforms, saying they don't include smaller classes or better salaries. But at the hotel next door, the head of the Histadrut Teachers Union, Yossi Wasserman, was telling reporters how the government reform plan can save the country's educational system. Even so, Secondary Teachers Association members said their struggle against the government will benefit the public.
The first is to bring back the 600,000 hours. I'm talking about 8.5 hours per week per student that were cut from the privilege of every student to study, which is 1 day. Our students of the secondary schools today learn 5 days a week, 1 day less than I was a student, and it shows. We see it now. And also about the size of the classes. We have now in the secondary schools 40, 41, sometimes 42 students per class.
An Egyptian weekly reports today that Hamas has succumbed to Egyptian demands and handed over a new videotape of IDF soldier Gilad Shalit, as well as a handwritten letter from the kidnapped soldier. Israeli officials and the Shalit family said they are unaware of the reported documents. According to the weekly Al-Aram Al-Arabi, the tape was transferred in an effort to prove to Israel that Shalit is still alive. Egyptian mediators plan to meet in the next few days with Hamas and Israeli officials in order to draft the final clauses of a deal that would secure Gilad Shalit's release. And in less than an hour, Jews around the world will begin reciting passages from the book of Psalms, asking for God's mercy in bringing about the release of Gilad Shalit, who was abducted by Hamas terrorists 2 years ago today, according to the Hebrew calendar. Joining me now in the studio is Rabbi Michael Strick, Executive Director of the Council of Young Israel Rabbis. Rabbi Strick, thank you for coming in this evening. I know just a short while ago your group sent out 40,000 emails requesting prayers for the victims of today's terrorist attack as well as for Gilad Shalit.
That is correct. It's closer to 50,000, and that 50,000 has expanded to even beyond that, with people sending it on to even further recipients. The message is, let us say let us recite the Psalms together as a unified force, because when we're unified, then we have the biggest impact. And we've basically coordinated in time zones all over the world that in about 40 minutes from now, everyone will be saying Psalm 121 together on behalf of Gilad Shalit, and of course on behalf of all the other dangers and distress, and of course in hope of full recovery for those who were hurt in today's incident.
How did the idea for today's worldwide prayer vigil take place?
The idea was activated and initiated in the Council's offices in New York. The Young Israel movement has expanded to worldwide impact, having stationed a group in Israel of retired rabbis who have established the Council of Young Israel Rabbis in Israel. And in America, of course, they service 150 synagogues of about 20,000 people. In Israel, 60 synagogues which are in touch with the Council of Young Israel Rabbis, with the Young Israel movement, in order to focus on positive relating to Israel, which has been on its agenda since 1912, which the Young Israel movement has always supported and highlighted what is going on in Israel as a prime support system for Israel. So on that basis, when there's distress, when there's duress, when there are problems that are going on, the Young Israel is the one issuing statements, which are picked up by the press in America, and activating their membership to do things on behalf of Israel.
Rabbi Strick, someone might question why now? Why not a year ago? Why not 2 years ago? This is the anniversary of the kidnapping.
The question is excellent, and a year ago and 2 years from now, there will always be issues on the agenda, and we have to look for the right timing that people can connect with and that it can be picked up as far as the world media is concerned. We're not only talking about Jews, we're talking about the universal community who is interested in morality and in the sustenance and survival of Israel. And so any moment is a good moment, and if there's an opportune moment because of some particular anniversary, even if it's a sad moment, so that is a time for introspection, and that is a good moment for us to make a statement and include others in this joint, unified statement on behalf of Israel.
Rabbi Strick, should rabbis be more proactive when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, or should they stick to praying?
They should be absolutely proactive, but their realm of expertise is issues of principle. And that's what they should be magnifying and highlighting in their statements. It's not a matter of taking a political stand. It's a matter of zeroing in on what are those issues that need to be evaluated in order to make a good decision. And that is very consistent with rabbinic thinking over the generations. We're able to zero in on the nuclear issue, which is the basic issue for decision making. And if there's a conflict of issues and we're able to deal with that conflict, our whole Talmud is filled with conflict resolution and the ability to see both sides of the coin and then make some sort of well thought out, good judgment decision.
Well, I know that the thoughts and prayers of all Israel are with the Shalit family and with Gilad Shalit, and congratulations to you and your organization for bringing about this worldwide prayer this evening, and we hope the Almighty is not only listening, but He will act favorably in this regard.
Thank you very much for helping us spread the word, and that is Psalm 121 at 6 p.m. Israel time.
All right, Rabbi Michael Strick, Executive Director with the Council of Young Israel Rabbis. Thank you, Rabbi Strick. Stock Talk now. Better late than never. The Tel Aviv Exchange opened a couple of hours late today due to technical difficulties resulting from workers' sanctions that kept the Boursa closed yesterday. Share prices declined in trading, and the shekel was stronger against major foreign currencies. Let's look at the late afternoon numbers. No change for the next few days. IBA weather guy says we can expect lots of sunshine. Temperatures about like today's. Here are the highs and lows. And that's all for today. We'll be back tomorrow, same. Shalom from Jerusalem.